Hello everyone, this is part 4 of What If Naruto Had to Prove Himself, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe, it gives me more motivation. Enjoy. The next morning found Naruto and Shikamaru once again sitting at the Ichiraku ramen stand. Both boys sat silently in front of steaming hot bowls. Naruto picked at some meat absently as he pondered his lazy friend's riddle. Shikamaru picked at his ear absently as he pondered his noodles. Naruto stared down into his bowl. There was a mushroom there, he knew there was, but he couldn't find it. No matter where he poked or prodded, it always managed to stay just out of sight. He breathed a deep sigh and held his head over the bowl. The steam curled up and washed against his face, soothing frowning muscles and easing the locked-up gears in his head. He closed his eyes and let his thoughts drift back to yesterday's answer and response. Neither offered any insight, but from there his memory shifted naturally into Sai's trial. He opened his eyes as an idea came to him. He considered it for a moment, then shrugged. It was worth a shot. He turned to the lazy ninja beside him. Hey, Shikamaru. The other boy glanced up from the infinite mysteries of pork and garlic. Is the answer being calm? Like having a level head? Shikamaru smirked. That is a good thing to have, but it's not the answer. His smile turned rueful. If it were, guys like me would never lose, right? And we know that's not the case. He turned back to his bowl. Naruto sat back to think about this, but out of the corner of his eye he caught sight of Hinata wading through the crowd. He beamed a smile and waved her over. Still absorbed in the contents of his breakfast, Shikamaru smirked again and said, "Good morning, Kiba." Naruto turned toward him with a confused frown, but before he could say a word something seized him by the end and hauled him off his stool. Kiba had him in a headlock. Morning, Shikamaru. He called back cheerfully over Naruto's struggles and shouts of protest. Mind if I borrow the knucklehead for a while? Go right ahead. Suddenly Shikamaru espered down into his noodles, drawing out the single chunk of sweetened chicken hidden there. He triumphantly popped it in his mouth as he turned toward them. One corner of his mouth quirked upward at the sight of Naruto's futile efforts to free himself. We're done for the day, so he's all yours. Kiba flashed a toothy grin. Great. Well, you heard him, Naruto. Let's get going, shall we? And with that he briskly walked off, forcing his captive to stumble awkwardly to keep on his feet. Wah hey, at least let me finish eating first. You can afford to miss one meal, can't you? Take it like a man. Naruto managed to twist enough to throw a glance back toward the stand. He saw Hinata, held at bay by Akamaru's tongue, giggle slightly at his predicament, but he could see the disappointment on her face. But, he sputtered in protest. Kiba smirked mischievously. Relax, Naruto. You can make out with your girlfriend later. Right now you and I need to go play a game of tag in the Forest of Death. Naruto shut up, scowling at the sudden fire he felt in his cheeks. Ooh. Force-fed dog food was too good for that smug little. He blinked as the second half of Kiba's words finally registered. Wait, what? Naruto was still scowling when they arrived. Waiting for them on the roof of a small shed outside the forest gates was Anko, munching her favorite kebab snacks and swinging her legs like a carefree schoolgirl. She exchanged a cheerful wave with Kiba before Naruto whirled on his friend. For what must have been the 10th time, he asked, now what did you mean by a game of tag? The wild ninja rolled his eyes and smirked. You're persistent, there's no doubting that much. He chuckled. I meant what I said. See, I figured you've had enough straight-up brawls for a while, so your trial for the day is the test of stealth, versus Akamaru and me. Naruto looked incredulous, but said, all right. So how's this going to work? Kiba grinned. Glad you asked. He motioned back to Anko. She threw her last kebab skewer behind her to complete the fair rendition of Hokage Mountain stuck in the closest tree, then hopped to the ground and stepped into the shed. You remember the bell test Kakashi made you take, right? Yeah. Well, think of this as an expanded version. Anko reappeared carrying a pair of odd belts that jingled as she strolled over. She offered one to Kiba, and while he put it on, she held the other up for Naruto's inspection. There are 20 bells here, all mounted on detachable metal rings around the belt. They can shift around pretty freely, but the rings are designed so they won't just fall off, you have to be trying to remove one. She demonstrated the relatively simple procedure. The belt itself is also woven to be light and flexible but very strong. She gave it a couple hard yanks, producing whip-like cracks accompanied by a chorus of bells. The threading stretched, but only slightly, firmly withstanding the strain. Then she offered the belt and detached bell to the blonde boy. Here, give it a try and then put it on. As Naruto complied, Kiba took over the explanation. So, you see how this is gonna work, right? It's just like Kakashi's test, except now you have your own bells to protect, too. You can use any means necessary to get them, but the game's over when you've got all my bells, or, more likely, I've got all of yours. Think you can make it at least a little bit of a challenge? Naruto flashed his side grin. Think you can keep up at all? You just watch, I'll pass your test no problem. The wild ninja grinned back. Ha, we'll see about that, he said, his voice full of challenge. Akamaru huffed an eager agreement. Anko cleared her tea and arched an eyebrow at Kiba. He sighed and rolled his eyes. Yeah, I was getting to that. Naruto glanced between them, curious. What? Kiba gave Anko a pointed look, causing her to smile and saunter off toward the gate. Then he turned back to his blonde friend. Just a couple special rules you need to know. Special rules. The irritating smile returned. Don't worry, they're pretty simple. Even a knucklehead like you can remember them. The irritated scowl also reappeared. Just get on with it. Okay? First, every bell you've got has to be on your belt at all times and no hiding them, with genjutsu or anything else. Second, whenever one of us nabs a bell, he has to retreat at least 20 yards away from the other guy before going back for another bell. Third, if the other guy's unconscious, you can only take one bell from him per hour. You get all that? Naruto frowned, but nodded. I don't get the point of those last two, though. Kiba rolled his eyes. It's the test of stealth, remember. The rules are designed around that. Like, what's the point if I can just knock you out and take all your bells at once? The blonde ninja glowered at him. I'd love to see you try. The other boy waved dismissively. Anyway, are you ready to begin, or are we gonna stand here chatting all day? Naruto smiled. By all means, let's get started, I can't wait to kick your butt. Kiba smiled too and then reached over and slammed a palm against his friend's forehead. Tag, you're it. As Naruto staggered back, the wild ninja leapt onto his huge dog. Let's go, Akamaru. The giant canine barked in assent and tore off toward the gate which Anko cheerfully nudged open. Hey! When Naruto finally recovered his balance, he glared at the retreating white blur and dashed after it as well, through the gate, up into the branches, and deep into bleak atmosphere of the forest of death. Naruto growled in annoyance. Not surprisingly, he'd quickly lost sight of Akamaru, and he'd also managed to lose his bearings in the process. He now leapt as quietly as he could through the trees in what he hoped was the right direction, constantly looking for any sign of his opponent's passage. At one relatively isolated branch, he stopped to look around. The forest was just like he remembered it, huge, dark, and creepy beyond all reason. He'd heard one or two people describe the place as beautiful in its own strange way, and he supposed he could see where that thought came from. The sunlight shining down between the leaves fell against the massive, gentle curves of moss-covered boughs to paint a scene that could almost be called tranquil for about 4 seconds. Then a 30-foot centipede would crawl into view or headhunter beetles would buzz by overhead to remind one where he was. And always there were those weird, alien yowls and chitterings from unknown creatures that lurked in the deeper shadows of the wood. Naruto wasn't afraid of the forest, but he never enjoyed coming here. Suddenly something on a branch not far off caught his attention. He hopped over to it and knelt down for a closer look. It was a good-sized scratch in the bark, but before he could tell whether it came from Akamaru, a shadow drifted across it. Naruto sighed at the poor timing of the clouds and bent closer yet to compensate. It was then he noticed both that the shadow was quickly growing and that it had several companions. He jerked his head up to see a horde of melon-sized insects tumbling down upon him. With a yelp of surprise, Naruto reflexively swatted the first of the bugs aside. He felt an eerie tingling pain on the back of his hand and grimaced. Chakra eaters. Great thinking quickly, he reached into his pouch, withdrew a pair of kunai, and spun into a defensive frenzy repelling the torrent of hungry bugs. His guard was not quite perfect. Several times he felt a burst of tingling as one of the insects brushed his fingers or the braces he wore. When he thought he'd gotten the last of them, he slowed. Only to see he'd been mistaken. Gah! One of the nasty little things landed squarely on his face. Another weight hit his shoulder, and he felt something tug at his hip. Immediately Naruto reached up and pried the first little roly-poly free, grimaced disgustedly at it, and flung it away. The one from his shoulder soon tumbled after it to look for prey the group could handle more easily. Naruto restrained several choice words as he waited for the sunburn-like pain to subside in his face and his shoulder would be throbbing for a while, he knew. Suddenly he frowned as the last few minutes played through his mind again. His face, his shoulder, and his hip. He glanced down at it, no pain, no bug. A new thought occurred to him and he hurriedly counted his bells. 19. Those same choice words resurfaced, but before they could escape Naruto thought he heard a snicker. When he spun to face it, he saw a thin offshoot of leaves shaking to a stop. Without another thought he tore off in that direction. Tenten's mouth twisted in concentration. I don't know, Lee. What do you think? In between blows on the practice dummy, her martial artist teammate grunted out an, about, what, Tenten? The markswoman rolled her eyes and let out an exasperated sigh. My trial, Lee, my trial. You know, for Naruto. I can't think of what to do for his trial. She waved her hands helplessly. I can't just fight him, you did that, and I wouldn't stand a chance anyway. Any ideas? Just pick, something, your toe. Good at. The corner of her mouth twisted again. I thought about having a shootout for accuracy and all, but what's the point? Naruto isn't a long-range fighter, and to be perfectly honest, marksmanship isn't really a necessary skill for a Hokage soon. It certainly never had much use for it. I feel so useless. Why? Ask me. Neji's still training like crazy for his trial, and Guy-sensei's, well, Guy-sensei. She heaved another sigh. I can see you're busy too. I guess I'll go find someone from the other teams. She turned and started to leave the gym. Tenten, wait. She paused and looked back at Lee. He'd stopped pummeling his dummy and turned to face her. She was surprised by the steel she saw in his eyes. Whatever you come up with, I know it will be a trial like no other. He smirked. And for what it is worth, I think you would give Naruto a run for his money as an opponent. I know both, because I have always known you to be an excellent shinobi. Tenten blushed slightly at his words. Lee struck his nice guy pose and continued, you and Neji, I am proud to have you both as my teammates. Tenten smiled warmly at him. And we're proud of you, Lee. She laughed. Even the not so cold and formal genius of the Hyuga. The taijutsu master grinned. One more thing we owe Naruto. Well, good luck with your trial, though I doubt you will need it. He turned back to the unfortunate dummy, but his teammate stuck around. What are you even doing, Lee? Your trial is over, right? Lee smirked easily as he began with a series of light, quick jabs. Naruto passed my test, that is true. However, all that means is that, if I wish to continue to challenge him, I must grow even stronger. With that, he lit into it full on, chaining combo after powerful combo. She rolled her eyes and smiled good-naturedly. Boys, she watched him backflip several feet, then rush back in, juking and weaving as he went. She spotted the gleam of something in his path and shouted, wait. Lee, there's a WHIPE. With a comic yell and bulging eyes, Lee slipped and tumbled headfirst into the dummy with a tremendous crash. Tenten winced. Puddle, there, she finished weakly. Suddenly her eyes lit up. Hey, that gives me a great idea. Thanks, Lee. She rushed from the room. Any time, Lee mumbled as he waited for the world to stop spinning. Naruto sprawled out on the forest floor, panting heavily as he stared up at the mid-afternoon sky. The corpses of a couple of things that resembled praying mantises lay sprawled out nearby, along with the various pieces of an enormous centipede and several smaller bugs. He decided this was really getting old. The last few hours had followed a simple pattern. Naruto would spot something of Kiba or Akamaru, he would burn a lot of time and distance following them, then he would encounter some of the forest's denizens. During the confusion, Kiba would sneak in, usually unseen, and snag a bell too. If he took too long. If they followed true to form this time. Suddenly Naruto heard and saw a rustle of leaves overhead. He grimaced. Yup. Really old. And annoying. As he got up and leapt into the trees in pursuit, he reflected that if there was one thing that bugged him more than this forest, it was people that underestimated him. In this case, that was a pair of jokers who thought the same tactic would work on him indefinitely. Naruto's foot caught on something as he flew through the briars and he tumbled, out of control, to the ground. Face buried in his arms, he bounced to a stop, muttering unpleasantries the whole way. He'd almost caught that flighty coward this time, too. A new, ominous, yet very familiar sound made his head pop up. Hiss. Naruto's face contorted in a grimace of an altogether different sort and he slowly shook his head. A snake. Why is there always a snake? It wasn't nearly as big as the first snake he'd met here, but the python staring him down now was definitely large in the normal sense, at least. Their contest lasted several more heartbeats before both sprang into motion. Naruto shoved himself off the ground, floating over the jaws snapping together where his head had just been. Planting his hands on the beast's head, he slammed it to the ground and flipped away. The moment his feet touched the turf, Naruto jumped again over the tail he saw sweeping his way. He misjudged the return speed of that tail, though, almost before he knew it he'd been caught around the ankle and slammed into a tree or two. It might have been 3, but the stars exploding before his eyes made it hard to tell. Either way, the next thing he knew the snake had several coils around him, pinning his arms and legs. He struggled mightily, to no avail. When he felt something tug at his belt again, however, Naruto smirked. The python's coils slackened instantly as it erupted in smoke. Suddenly 4 Narutos, including the supposed victim, pounced on the unsuspecting thief. As his clones held Kiba down, the original reached for his opponent's belt and stopped, frowning. No bells. No belt. This time it was Kiba's turn to smile. In another puff of smoke the wild ninja's form was replaced with that of his wild dog. Akamaru, bigger and physically stronger than his human counterpart, easily shook off the startled shadow clones and bolted into the shadows. The 3 duplicates took off after him, but the real Naruto stalled just long enough to spot a glimpse of black jacket in the brush. A determined smile sprouted on his face. So that's how it is, Kiba. Sakura dropped her disposable gloves in the waste receptacle and leaned back in her chair. It was true she and the others were off mission duty, but she still came into work today at the hospital. Working helped her think this was especially true on a slow day like this one had been. She had just finished with the only semi-serious injury of the day, though still non-life-threatening, so now it was back to her thoughts. Thoughts of her past, thoughts of her future, thoughts of her teammates. Thoughts of Naruto. She had every faith that he'd continue to tear through his trials. That meant it would be her turn to test him soon. But not yet, not until she had time to sort out the riot of conflicting feelings rampaging through her head. She glanced at the clock on the wall and heaved a deep sigh. Eventually she'd have to stop putting off dealing with him, but for now she had one more excuse, another friend she couldn't neglect. It was time to visit him again. After that first fake out, the wild ninja had chosen his ambushes more carefully, but Naruto was one step ahead of him. He let a shadow clone fall into the next trap, while he and several more waited and watched. Eventually, the bell-less Kiba rushed in again while the clone was occupied. Several Narutos leapt in to intervene, and the rest in the shadows tensed. As Akamaru once again revealed himself and escaped, the real Kiba fled into a net of clones. A bell was taken before he could get away. A grinning duplicate delivered his prize to the original, who happily snapped it onto his belt, never having budged an inch from the start. He'd quickly decided it had to be shadow clones making his ambushes. He just couldn't move quietly enough with his noisy belt to avoid detection. So, he let his clones be stealthy for him. At an identical setup not much later, the clone web tackled Kiba again only to have him explode in a puff of smoke. Startled, one of them shouted, "Duplicate." In warning. The real Naruto, hunkered behind a bush, stiffened and leaped suddenly, barely avoiding Kiba's grab. He planted a foot on the back of the wild ninja's head, but with another burst of smoke he saw he'd kicked a log. Replacement, he growled. Akamaru, who'd taken longer to get free this time, finally took off. Knowing he'd eventually rejoin Kiba, all the Narutos gave pursuit, but the original entertained a nagging doubt as he did so. The Narutos who'd been tailing Akamaru found themselves slamming into a web of TS wires after a sudden turn. The wires didn't trigger anything, but they quickly tangled and incapacitated their victims. Akamaru, once again in his partner's form, returned and, after a quick bout of sniffing, pointed out the real Naruto, who'd been smart enough to hold back from the crowd. Kiba reappeared and struck at a log amidst some smoke, which is what he himself became when Naruto returned and strong-armed him. What followed was chaotic. A barrage of replacements, transformations, duplicates and shadow clones stormed through the quickly fading light until no spectator could have told who was who, all to a jingling chorus that only added to the confusion. More than a few bells exchanged hands during this riot of activity, and when both parties finally broke off, it was revealed that Naruto came out on the winning end, still behind overall, but steadily coming back. Hinata sat back slowly, rubbing her eyes wearily. She'd waited near the forest of death practically all day, but when it became clear her friends would be there overnight, she'd regretfully gone home. She worried about them, but they were both great ninjas, she trusted them to be okay. She meant to go to sleep immediately so she could return early tomorrow, but then an idea had come to her she couldn't ignore, and she'd been up working on it ever since. She'd convinced herself that she really did need some sleep when not even her Byakugan eyes could stay open, but she felt good about the progress she'd made on this little project. Just before climbing into bed, she glanced out her window at the moon and wondered if Naruto was looking at the same patch of night sky that she was. Naruto sat down heavily and let his limbs droop. Despite his immense fatigue, he smiled. Another round or two like that and he'd have Kiba on the ropes. For now, though, it was time for a little nap. Kiba and Akamaru had to be doing the same elsewhere. Naruto knew that tussle had taken even more out of them than it had him, and he'd set up a TS wire system to wake him with plenty of warning if some of the forest creatures felt like visiting, so he didn't fear any ambush. As he felt the tug of sleep, Naruto glanced up at the night sky and gave a startled double take. He could have sworn he'd seen Hinata's pale eyes looking down upon him, so he chuckled when a second look revealed only the moon. Still, with that thought in mind, he nodded off with a smile on his face. Kiba had to do some soul-searching the day Naruto revealed his biggest secret. The blonde boy had been understandably reluctant to tell him. Among the Leaf 12, Kiba was remarkably one of the few who'd lost a family member to the fox. The truth was, Kiba never even had a chance to meet his father, and it hurt. A lot. Because he'd had to grow up hearing his friends brag about the things they did with the dads, because he'd had to endure his mother's and sister's tears when they thought no one was looking, because of the ache these things forced him to feel, he'd grown up hating the fox. He didn't know what to think of the fact that it not only lived on, but had done so within one of his best friends. All those years of fantasized vengeance, and the beast had been right under his prized nose the entire time. It was easy to imagine the foul creature sneering at him, laughing at him for his ignorance, and he wanted to hate it all the more for it. But Naruto. So he'd gone off on his own for a while, to think about it. One thing stuck in his mind the whole time, something Naruto had said before, respectfully giving him the space he needed. If I could undo everything that happened that day, I would. But since I can't, I will use every ounce of strength I have to make sure it will never happen again. Believe it. Kiba could tell, from the gravity of his tone and the look in his eye, that he meant it. That had given him a whole new spin on his self-reflections. Despite missing his father, Kiba had a family that cared for him. Naruto had grown up an only child without either parent. What must that have been like? He knew the hardships the boy had been forced to endure as a child. Heck, he'd caused a few, intentionally or not. His own pains felt downright selfish in comparison. Having eventually grown to be good buddies with Naruto over the years, Kiba could clearly see that he and the fox were not at all the same, but the whole village had punished him as though he were. To emerge from all of that injustice still with a desire to protect everyone, to atone for crimes he did not commit, well, Kiba had wondered ever since if he would be as big a man, faced with the same life and the same choice. Kiba had come back, greeted Naruto with a slap on the back, and acted as though nothing had changed, but from then on he'd been very proud of his friend, and very distasteful of anyone who refused to look past the past. A large part of the Council of Elders, for example. He might never forgive the fox for taking his father from him, but he could take comfort knowing its power was now in much better hands. Either way, Naruto was too valuable a friend to pass up. But that didn't mean he had to go easy on him. Whether the knucklehead liked it or not, he and Kiba were rivals forever. He smirked at the long, low tone echoing through the wood. A signal Anko was raising from the central tower as she'd done every hour on the hour since the start. Let's go, Akamaru. The two of them moved to slip through that shoddy wire net and liberate 2 more bells. Naruto woke with a start. His grid had been sped. He leapt up, instantly alert, but burst out laughing at the sight of his intruder. A squirrel had gotten its foot caught in the wires and was now peevishly trying to free itself. He untangled the little thing and let it go. Then he noticed something odd. He didn't seem to jingle nearly as much when he moved as he thought he had last night. He checked his belt and nearly fell off the branch in surprise. He only had 1 bell left. His mind whirled, but he forced himself to calm down and think it through. The bells couldn't just fall off, and there was no way any of the forest creatures had gotten through his net, so that left only Kiba and Akamaru. But they had to rest, too, didn't they? They'd have been at this all night too. He grimaced and slapped his forehead as a blatantly obvious fact resurfaced. The Inuzuka clan used soldier pills. He felt like kicking himself, not expecting raids from his opponents. He hadn't built the net to ninja standard, but he took a deep breath, squatted, and worked his way through his options. Minutes passed and his frown deepened further and further. Nothing he thought of had a good enough chance to work to risk losing his last bell. He kept coming back to that jutsu, but the idea made him uneasy. He'd begun learning that only recently, and he'd never actually tried it. 2. He had no idea what would happen if something went wrong, though he'd heard stories of failed attempts that weren't pretty. No, the risks were just too great. Then again, the sun was rising and he couldn't think of anything else. His hand went to his pouch. For the 8th time, Hinata almost went up to him, and for the 8th time she did not. Shikamaru waited at the Ichiraku ramen stand as he had the last couple of mornings. The difference between then and now was that he lay slumped over the counter fast asleep, despite the owner's questioning looks. She really wanted to ask him if he'd seen Naruto, but it would be rude to wake him. She was just giving up and turned to go to the forest anyway when a loud voice boomed from behind her. Hey, Shikamaru. Have you seen Naruto this morning? She turned back, wondering who else could be looking for him. Choji stomped up to the stand, took a seat on the far side of Shikamaru from Hinata, and called out an order for ramen. To her surprise, the lazy ninja immediately pulled his head up from the table upon hearing his friend's voice without a hint of the fatigue he'd appeared to have. She couldn't see his face, but he spoke cheerfully. Hey, Choji. Nah, I haven't seen him yet, but since this is Naruto we're talking about, that's not saying much. Choji frowned. Kiba had him yesterday, didn't he? Yeah, actually, since I haven't heard anything from Kiba either, they're probably still in the forest. His voice grew suddenly louder. Did you hear that, Hinata? She jerked in surprise. She still couldn't see his face, but his expression was likely mirrored in Choji's smirk. Turning pink, she called out a stammered thank you and hurried off. Kiba shook his head in disappointment. The last hourly tone they needed to win had just sounded, and Naruto slept on like a rock. He'd even shifted enough that his wire net wouldn't alert him properly anymore. Akamaru squatted right on top of at least one of the strands. The guy started to do so well, too. Oh well, he said with chagrin as he cheerfully plucked the last bell free and clicked it onto his belt. Then he reached over and shook his friend. Hey, knucklehead, wake up. Better luck next time, but this test is over. You lose. To his consternation, Naruto immediately sat up and grinned at him. And burst into smoke. As they both coughed and sputtered, a voice crowed out from behind him, not yet, I haven't. He spun around. Naruto stood behind him, side grin in place as he twirled a bell's loop on one finger. Kiba offered a grudging smile. The two ninjas stared at each other for all of 2 seconds before springing into motion away from each other. Kiba turned to his dog when they were several feet away. Okay, Akamaru, you go follow him. He's only got, but Akamaru suddenly barked in alarm. Kiba whirled forward again. I'll take that. To see Naruto sail by and snag another bell as he passed. Kiba was stunned for a heartbeat. What in the then? He snapped out of it. Quick, after him. The two of them reversed course to follow the blonde shinobi, but Kiba felt something tugging at his waist as he jumped. Looking over his shoulder, he saw another Naruto brandishing a grin and another bell. Shadow clones, he thought. Kiba had just enough time to wonder how he, with all his enhanced senses, missed that one's arrival. Then another unnoticed clone caught him out of the air. It was over in 15 minutes. No matter where they went, Kiba and Akamaru could not get away from the Naruto clones. They would appear literally out of nowhere, and while they would not disappear as quickly, it was impossible to chase one without running into an instantly made ambush. Even replacement jutsus were ineffective in delaying the torrent of clones. They somehow knew right where to appear. The two of them, Dog and Shinobi, had been forced back to back on a branch, picking off the clones as they appeared. It was not a strategy in which they could make any gain, for they had yet to see the real Naruto, whom the clones were undoubtedly returning to, but it slowed the rate at which they were losing. There seemed to be a pause in the clones' appearances, so Kiba spared a moment to glance at his belt. He grimaced to left. Suddenly 8 clones appeared, not in a puff of smoke, not with the customary shimmer, but just there one moment where they hadn't been the moment before. The wild duo managed to beat back 5, but 3 managed to slip through and slam headlong into Akamaru. Before Kiba could turn to help his partner, 3 more Narutos appeared, and 2 seized his arms. The third's arrival was heralded with a jingle of bells. Kiba's eyes narrowed. Naruto. It was not so much a question as a statement. The blonde ninja straightened and smiled. You almost had me there, Kiba. But now the game is over. And I've won. He reached over and took one of the 2 bells from Kiba. Kiba seed an eyebrow. I don't think so. I've still got one more bell and you have to move 20 yards away. Before you do, though, how did you keep finding me all this time? Naruto chuckled. I'll solve both issues for you at the same time. He made a hand sign. The final bell on the other boy's belt exploded in a burst of smoke. When the cloud cleared away, all that remained was a slip of paper with a curious design on it. You said we couldn't hide our bells, but you didn't say anything about hiding things as bells, did you? Kiba gaped at it. What is that? I've never seen a design like that before. The blonde boy grinned and scratched the back of his ene abashedly. No one in our generation has. It's a flying thunder seal. My father had a jutsu that allowed him to instantly teleport to anywhere there was one of those seals. If he managed to slip it onto an enemy, he could follow him anywhere. He shrugged. I've only just recently begun to learn it. To be honest, I'm kinda surprised it worked. Kiba nodded slowly. Which is why you only used it through your shadow clones. Until I was confident I wouldn't appear inside a tree, yeah. The clones holding Akamaru and Kiba's arms disappeared. So, what do you think? The wild ninja smirked and shook his head in chagrin. Well, I think you kind of missed the point of the whole stealth aspect, but yeah, I guess you pass. Hinata perked up at the sound of approaching voices. She didn't have to wait long before Naruto, Kiba, Anko and Akamaru came strolling down the path. She stood waiting under a nearby tree as Anko unlocked the gate and the group exited the forest of death. Her friends looked very happy to be out. She wondered if Naruto had passed, but the excited grin that appeared when he spotted her and jogged over told her all she needed to know. She managed to not be quite as surprised this time when he caught her up in a bear hug. Hey, Hinata, I won. There were all these bugs, but of course they were no match for me. Oh, and there was this squirrel I know you would have loved, but anyway, I won and it worked. You should have seen it. I was like poof. And the look on Kiba's face, he spoke all in a jumble. She couldn't catch half of what he said, but she smiled and hugged him back all the same. Over her shoulder, Kiba got an impish look on his face and opened his mouth to say something, but a death glare from Naruto carefully hidden from Hinata made him pause, and before he could reattempt, Anko caught him in a headlock and hauled him off. Akamaru looked back and forth between the two groups for a moment before hurrying after Kiba. Suddenly Hinata noticed something and gasped. Naruto jerked back to look at her. What is it? He asked with some alarm. She pinked slightly as her eyes drifted downward. Your coat. He blinked, and looked over his own shoulder and then under his arms. His long white coat was in tatters. There were countless SS all along the back, and several small stains ranging from blood to dirt to sap. Oh, that, he said, looking embarrassed. Don't worry, I'm okay. I just had a close encounter with a patch of briars. Oh, and bugs. Lots of bugs. His tone turned regretful. But I guess this coat is a loss, huh? He chuckled weakly, gazing at the beat-up fabric with a glum look. Hinata bit her lip, looking at the many tears and holes. You Actually, she began hesitantly, if you like, I see could try to repair it. His eyes lit up. Really? She nodded. Yes. That'd be great, Hinata, I'd really appreciate it. He eagerly pulled the coat off and offered it to her. She took it gingerly, gave it a warm look for a long moment, and smiled up at him. I'll get started right away. Naruto looked surprised. What? Now? I'm not in a hurry, that can wait, can't it? He was starting to put on his pathetic face again, and Hinata giggled when she realized the last time he ate must have been yesterday morning. Okay, ramen first, she said sweetly. He lit up in a grin, but before he could say a word a huge arm seized him around the N. Sorry Naruto, not right now. Over the blonde boy's shouts of dismay, Choji looked at Hinata apologetically. I'm afraid I need to borrow him for the day, Hinata. Do you mind? Her eyes met Naruto's and they searched each other for a moment. They heaved a deep sigh in unison even as she blushed. And no, Choji. Go ahead. As Choji smiled and moved off, she thought she heard Naruto mutter dejectedly, what is it with you people and headlocks? Hinata took another look at the coat in her arms. It was a proud thing from a proud legacy, whose dignity in her opinion was not brought low by its injuries. She knew it, like the man who wore it, would weather any amount of adversity and come out stronger than ever, and she took pride that she could help it on its way. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.